Hello, everyone, and welcome to Jump with N2 Growth. And as a reminder, every Wednesday at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, you can find us here. And let's get down to it. So what we're going to talk about today with you is, so you're the boss now, or you've been the boss for a long time. And the question as human capital advisors, and we're always surprised that when people are either coming up in their career or if they've arrived, how it can be a challenging question for some. Why would anyone want to work for you? And why do they still want to work for you? So I'll go over to you, Vera. How do you think about that in our human capital business? You've worked all over the world. Just react to that with some of the bosses that you've seen, the people that we engage in terms of placing in boardrooms and C-suites around the world. Just react to that.
Thank you, Brian. Very interesting topic and very broad, actually. My view in general is that I think that if we look back at the situation, the same very question 20 years ago, 15, 10, what is seen is that people are constantly rethinking their relationship with organization and essentially with the leaders and with those people that actually define and shape the organizational culture, right? Leaders, CEOs, top managers. And I think it's getting more and more relevant, especially now, because I think that a couple of weeks ago, another group brought this discussion regarding the overall attitude of employees that are now maybe between 25, 30 years old. So for them, the aspect of the organizational culture, organizational values, like it's sometimes much more important than economic benefits, like short-term economic benefits they can get from this position. And this is great. Then I think that within our environment, right, executive search, we work with companies that in most of the cases, they have already made this first step towards creating this like open, inclusive, people-driven culture, right? Because otherwise they wouldn't go to a professional advisor to resolve specific issues related to human capital. So the situation globally, I'm sure that it's not perfect, and it depends on the culture, it depends on the economy, it depends on a company, and you have still many organizations which are very traditional, very autocratic, and it's a shame because there's so much talent on the market. And when you see a person that is just working in a company without really being engaged and without really thinking deeply about this mutual value creation, mutual relationship, for me, like when I hear these stories, it makes me sad because it's really, let's say it's a waste of time, but in a way it's a waste of energy on both sides, because maybe everyone is expecting something from the other part, but they cannot reach a compromise of how to find this solution. So for me, it's really something fundamental. And as you said, Brian, like I think the topic of whether to work or not for a specific person, it correlates with the topic whether to work or not in a specific corporate culture.
Well, there's something there's something you said, Vera, up front, which I thought was really powerful. People are constantly rethinking the relationship with the company, but with the relationship with their boss. And that's every day. And I think oftentimes people can lose sight of that. As you know, one of my favorite leaders is a guy named Colin Powell. And I've told the story before where Colin Powell was a young lieutenant in Vietnam, a World War II and Korean War veteran, comes up to him and said, "Sir, you know how you're a great leader." And Colin Powell said, "How?" He said, "When people follow you merely because they're curious." And this notion that people are constantly rethinking the relationship with their boss and therefore the company. How have you seen, Ken, how have you seen people keep people curious? How do you keep people curious as a former special operations officer in the military? Just react to that?
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of similarities between the business world and the military on this topic, Brian. And I think, and I know you can attest to it as well too. But even when we're having conversations with candidates for particularly CEO positions, it's interesting. I think a couple things that they really like to dig into, which I've also used in when I've led teams and currently lead teams here as well too, is oftentimes they're asking like, what is going to be their autonomy, while also getting support largely from their board of directors, right? Like, are they going to have the ability to take ownership over that role in the company and really implement what they see as the best path forward, obviously in line with the board, but also is the board going to give them the freedom to go try new things and do what they believe is the best path forward and build the team around them to support them in that effort, while also getting the support that they need from the board. So I think that goes to like how I've thought about it as well too, in leading teams and having people work for you is often like, what kind of autonomy am I giving my people? How much flexibility am I giving them to be creative and try new things, but at the same time giving them opportunities to shine and be prepared for professional growth and professional development at the same time? Because I think most fast growing organizations or successful organizations are largely going to have, if people do well, they're going to have other opportunities elsewhere. But they also, they should have opportunities within their own organization, and keeping them motivated and doing those things, I think are very important. And what I often do is try and highlight those people. I would do this in the military, bring in my squad leaders who are middle managers, bring them into the planning process. If they can be a part of our mission planning process and they have ownership into the plan, when it comes time to deliver the plan to the rest of the team, but also execute the plan, if their voice has been heard, part of the plan is built around what their input was, they're not only going to like own it and implement the plan, but also be more motivated to execute it as well too. So I think bringing them in, also oftentimes these people are going to be subject matter experts in areas where the ultimate leader are not, and that's fine. I think that's great, Brian. We talk about it all the time on this podcast, right? Like, you as a 3-time CEO, you have like prided yourself in the ability to build teams and identify good people and put the right people in the right position. Now you surround yourself with people who are better than you in certain areas, I would assume. And so that, I think, bringing those people into those different types of positions, bringing them in early, highlighting them, letting them give the briefings to the senior leadership, taking a step back as the leader, show humility and put your people out front. You'll continue to motivate them. You'll get a better work product out of them, and they're going to want to continue to work for you going forward.
How do you balance? A question just came in.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen this, and I'm sure we all have our whole lives. Someone starts out as a leader with all the swagger, the confidence, and whatever that means to someone, it draws people to them. And surprisingly enough, as people move up to senior vice president and above, I call it, they begin to retreat to safety.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've arrived, and then it's interesting, they sort of lose that swagger, they sort of lose that fire, and ironically, but they're in the senior most position. So how do you balance that? And because people should become, as they grow up and mature, they become more humble, right. and they become less outwardly, that swagger can go away. And there's a balance there. What got you here will get you there, and all that stuff. So have you seen people balance the importance of maintaining that swagger as a boss, which makes people curious enough because they want to be proud. They want to work for you. They want to work for this woman or this guy. It reflects in the brand. But how do you, as people rise up in an organization, maintain that balance between humility and that swagger that inspires people? How have you seen people do it, or just react to that?
I think a lot of it comes to like accessibility, right? I think like, how accessible is this leader to all levels within the organization? I think, folks who maybe lose the swagger to some degree, is that because like people just don't see them? They're not around. They're not, aside from maybe a weekly or bi-weekly meeting, outside of that, or are they just never interacting with the folks? Are they concerned like the ivory tower kind of perspective as well too? So I think That's kind of how I think of it, at least initially, is how what are your touch points with your people? Aside from your direct reports, what about their direct reports and below as well too? And how do you interact? I think, when I was in the military, what I would try and do is when I thought of the different levels, kind of like the senior enlisted, my squad leaders or middle managers, and then you had the rest of the team underneath them. And so what I was always trying to do was empower my middle managers, give them that opportunity, bring them into the planning process, give them ownership of what we were doing. And then my job with the soldiers and on their teams was to motivate them, give them the opportunities to succeed, give them opportunities to advance their education and training and all those things to better prepare them, so that they knew we were investing in them to be prepared to take over those leadership roles in not the too far distant future. So that's how I always thought about it. Empower my middle managers and motivate my line employees, if you will, and prepare them as best as possible to take over those leadership roles, probably sooner than maybe was a typical timeline.
And we work with senior executives every day, all over the world at different levels, certainly senior vice president and above.
Yep.
And what advice would you give, either Vera or Ken, to either current senior leaders who've arrived, or what advice would you give up-and-comers in terms of establishing that words matter? I use swagger for a reason, because it's impactful, but we all understand the nuance. If you have too much swagger, it can be bad. But what advice would you give an upcomer or someone who has arrived in terms of maintaining that presence, that swagger in an office, or in a company, because that's something that often does go away. People, you've heard me say before, comfort's where everything goes to die, including your ability to continue to energize and attract people to you. Just because you got there doesn't mean that you can stay there or that people follow you. So what advice would you give up-and-comers in this regard, or people who've already arrived and may have lost it in this regard? Maintaining your swagger. What have you seen? What advice would you give, Vera?
I would say make it meaningful, because I think that here at Untitled Growth is true that we see senior leaders, vice presidents, but I would say that I think at each level, an executive is looking for a meaning, right? We've seen so many executives that at some point they their position and their comfort zone is not enough for them, and they go teaching, they go on boards of little startups because they want to give. And I think that when you give, when you really bring a new meaning to a new position, and also help your employees to realize that everything they do is meaningful, that's when you become to enjoy your position and all the aspects of of your promotion, your professional growth, which go outside the comfort zone. Because it's obvious that it's it has a technical, right, the technical component, the economic component, it's fine. But I'm convinced that for the majority of leaders that arrive to this stage, it's really about finding a new meaning of a new role.
I love that. Thanks, Vera. How about you, Ken?
I think especially for the up-and-comers who are just getting into these roles at this point for the first time, I think, don't forget what got you there, right? You don't have to change overnight entirely, but you are in a much different position, in a different role. I think as soon as possible, what you can do is start training your replacements. Literally train your replacement. Give your people the opportunity to succeed, that they can come to you to get the guidance and support, but continuing to give them the autonomy to be successful is, I think, going to give you the swagger, if you will, of, okay, I go to this person, they're going to give me the opportunities. People are going to want to work for them continually. I think that, if you can be that motivating, driving force, and if you're giving your people kind of your mission or kind of an end state, but not dictating to them how they have to get there every step of the way, and you're giving them that freedom to try new things and do different things and break rules like we talked about a couple weeks ago, I think, you're going to attract talent. People are going to know that's Brian Kibby's team. that's where I want to be. That's who I want to work for. And I think that swagger will come naturally. And then you're in that position for a reason. And don't forget that, right? You have years of experience that these people are looking to you for guidance. They don't need you to tell them how to do every piece of their job, but be there and be open and provide that guidance when necessary and give them those guiding principles or that end state that you're looking for, but don't tell them necessarily how to get there every step of the way.
I love that. One of the things I love to do is remind people. In fact, one of my favorite questions to anyone is, if money were no object, and if you could do anything, what would you do? In so many cases, I don't know what the percentage is, but it's over 75%. Almost everyone says, I would coach or I would teach. And as people are coming up in an organization, or if they've already arrived, our lives can be taken up with meeting after meeting after meeting. And regardless of where we are in our lives and in careers, we do have so much to teach if you really think about it. Mm-hmm. And there are opportunities throughout the day to teach, to mentor, and take those opportunities because it keeps you sharp. And back to your point, Vera, it has to be meaningful. And when we're teaching the things that we're passionate about, it matters, it is meaningful, and we're changing lives. And then it does all the things that we're talking about in terms of it continues to draw people to you and to your companies as a leader, especially if you take that approach. Are there people that you're following now or that you're reading about who do for you, or people that we talk to on a daily basis for positions that we work with across the world, who do a great job of drawing people to them, making people curious, and who continue to maintain that swagger? Are there examples that you can share with us or through books that we can also learn from? Vera, how about you?
I think we have plenty of those examples. And again, I want to grow so incredibly lucky because every day we receive dozens, I think, of CVs of senior executives, and some of them are not necessarily looking for a change in the short term. Some of them are just reaching out to growth because they would like to talk. And for us as executive search consultants, as business consultants, it's like every such conversation with the candidate is so rewarding because you speak with people that really made a difference. And the stories, like I cannot really put a very specific example because I write down all those stories for us also to keep it as an internal record for those people when they're placed in specific positions or when we advise them. But I think that generally speaking, all these stories, they are very much driven by values and driven by culture. Mm-hmm. Because today the word corporate culture, you hear it so many times, both from your clients, both from the candidates, and like even when you speak to candidates, the first question they ask you is about the culture. So this is something which is important for them, and essentially those who, let's say, those executives that make a difference are those that are able to create this authentic, people-driven culture, regardless of the context, because then we can obviously put lots of restrictions on top, saying that the industry is very conservative, the company is too small, the geography is complicated. But essentially, great leaders, it's maybe 90%. It's all about their personal values and it's all about their personal drive. So for me, each single candidate we speak to is a great example.
I love that. Ken, how about you? Examples of great leaders that you've seen or candidates that we talk to on a regular basis. Just as an example, one of the things that we all love about our job is we talk to crazy smart and talented people all the time. So I was talking to the CEO the other day, who currently runs a really cool business in Hollywood, and he said it's a smallish company, about 200 people, and they put every single employee at about the 3-month mark, every new employee at any level, through a full-on 360-degree review across the companies, survey their team, above, beyond, customers. And I had never, and they're so disciplined about it. And I've seen that I've certainly seen 360-degree reviews my whole life, but every employee that starts at the 3-month level doing a thorough, aggressive review, and they let them know that up front, it's incredibly powerful. So it's something I'm going to start implementing in my own life. But what have you seen out there with either in the celebrities or people that we talk to every day along those lines?
Yeah, one that comes to mind to me is after reading a book not fairly recently, was Samantha Power book, The Education of an Idealist, and she was a previous UN ambassador for the U.S. under the Obama administration. And one of the stories that she highlights there, I mean, she shows a lot of vulnerability of being this incredibly powerful individual and powerful woman in this, powerful position. But telling some of the vulnerabilities of feeling of also being a mother with young children at home. Where my wife and I are experiencing that with our first right now, who's 5 months old, and my wife is back to work now as a lawyer. But also Samantha Power also talks about a time when she first came to the UN. She went out of her way to go meet with all the delegates and ambassadors from all these other countries who the US had just not taken the time to actually speak to for years. And some of these conversations were some of the biggest things to happen in these other countries' offices in New York at the UN in years and years and years. So, she showed that humility to go in and just buy some goodwill and, get to talk to these people, get to know them, even if it's a 30-minute or an hour conversation. Those are the people, establishing the relationships and doing that work up front. And then when it comes time down the road, when you need somebody or you need to leverage somebody for assistance or support or whatever it may be, you're not just somebody calling up looking for help. You've built that foundation of trust and a relationship as well. And I know, Brian, you've talked about that internally with our team here at N2 Growth when you think about business development and sales. I think, so it was kind of an interesting dynamic that I could think of where there's some commonality between, our business, and then Samantha Power at the UN.
Very cool. One of the greatest opportunities to get people excited about you as the boss, or get excited about your company. And there's never been a better time throughout human history to carry a message forward. We all know what the tools are, and new tools like TikTok, video, Twitter is a mass tool and growing more every day. Facebook, we get those different tools. When we see candidates at every level, and I'm a little biased here, and I have to shove back my bias on this. When I'm talking to, and they have really no except for LinkedIn, and they like a couple things here and there. But if I'm looking at an executive, and I see, especially marketing executives, that are not personally using the new to people to them, and more importantly, draw people to their companies, draw people to their services and products, but they're not willing to put themselves out there. How do you think about that, and how should companies and prospective employers think about that? The C-suite. There's a reason to not do it, and there's a reason to do it. I get all that, but how do you think people should think about that? We're looking at C-suite executives or up and coming if they're not using those tools.
All right. Yeah, and I think I got what you're saying there, Brian. It was coming in a little broken, but I think so. You're asking, if people aren't using the tools that are available to them to really get their message out there as frequently as possible at the C-suite.
And to get people excited about them. People love to say, if they see a great message that Vera put up on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever the case is, they love to say, I work for that woman. Right. Whether they say it specifically or not, it's in their brain. But when you're interviewing people, up and comers or people at the C-suite, and they fail to use those tools, whether it's a retreat to safety or whatever the case is, how should you think about that?
I think at least one thing to think about is whenever I think anybody in a leadership position is trying to be something they're not, or trying to fake something, or trying to follow clear steps out of a how-to book, I think people will identify that immediately. So trying to do something that is just entirely out of your comfort zone can be useful, but at the same time, when you're trying to be something that you're not, most people will see right through that. So I think that could backfire at times. And if getting in front of a screen or giving a video message is not the most comfortable thing for you, I think there's other ways to get the word out. You can write articles or put posts up like you're saying, Brian. I think you can also do kind of town hall meetings with your company. I think, most leaders, I think, understand that they're going to have to get up in front of their people at some point. So even if that is uncomfortable, that's just part of the development and leadership development process as well too. I don't know. I think it's industry dependent too. I don't think everybody needs to be out there beating their chest and rah on every social media platform either. I think, sometimes people like leaders who are quiet professionals. I think there's something to that as well too. And that's kind of how I think of it.
And I think that's fair. And that's why I know that I have a form of a bias. I also know I'm a little bit more extroverted, and I have a marketing background. I have to push that back.
Right.
I learned a very valuable lesson in 2008. I met a woman named Susie Welch, and everyone knows I'm a deep fan of her husband, Jack Welch, who passed recently. And in 2008, whatever the context was, I had a long conversation. I had the opportunity to have a long conversation with Susie and Jack. And at that time, I was the head of sales and marketing for a very large company. And she mentioned Twitter, and she asked me if I was on Twitter. And I said, no. Not because she's a very nice person, but I saw her flinch. And she's like, oh, but aren't you in marketing? Something more pleasant than that.
Right.
But that was a message. And so I straddle in between people who are in senior level positions who are not using those tools to drive their brand, but more importantly, drive the brand of their teams and their companies. And I think you're right. I think there's a balance between it, and it has to be authentic. Some people aren't comfortable with that. And if you're not comfortable with it, it can be dangerous. But Vera, what are your thoughts on that?
Interesting. Yes, I mean, I'm just thinking, and I agree with Ken in a way that obviously there are different tools that can be used in order to position like the leader's brand, right, in the eyes of the candidates, because it depends on the country, depends on the industry, and also depends which kind of message he's launching to the market. So personally, for me, I think that the most impressive message is not at all when you speak about yourself, but when you speak about your people, about your team. So a leader who's constantly appreciating the work of his peers, of his teammates, and again, like coming back to what Ken said regarding giving a chance, giving an opportunity for people to show their work and to show their skills. This is, I think, the message which usually attracts a lot of attention. Then I think that generally leaders, they have, like, a priori, they have a lot of visibility, right? Because people speak about them, people discuss who is who, and especially in certain economies which are relatively small, this is very important. And if something is wrong, there's no way you can hide it. There's absolutely no way you can hide it. And I think that for a leader, it is very important to find a balance between this internal and external perspective, in a way, like, first to lead by example, to really take care about what you do on a daily basis, how you interact with people, and obviously, if possible, using the right communication message, making an emphasis on those things which you can control and those people that are around you. Because I think it's never about yourself. Like, about yourself, there are many people who will talk about it and will definitely make an objective judgment if someone is a great executive, is a great leader.
So the key is, I think you're right. Jack Welch also said, if you wear your ambition on your sleeve, it's a career killer. And if you're using all the different tools to just shape your own brand, then it's a killer. But if you're using it, as you said earlier, to teach, and you're being meaningful about it, and you're teaching through stories of other people and talking about whatever the forum is, you can find people who do that well online. And just as any great ski instructor will tell you, how do you learn to ski? Ski behind me is what they'll say. So find people who are really great at it in a very humble, authentic way, and just find a way to mirror them. So what advice would you give up and comers? So we spend most of our days at the C-suite, either advising, coaching, consulting, and placing working with companies to place senior executives. What best piece of advice would you give up and comers, someone right out of college and beyond, in terms of how you continue to make yourself curious enough for people to follow? What last piece of advice would you give, Ken? I'll start with you.
Oh man. Okay. For someone right out of college to get someone to follow, I mean, this may be a little bit of an old saying or overused, but in order to become a good leader, I think you do have to learn how to follow as well too, right? And I don't think I think it's worth stating too, if you're coming out of college, I think it's identifying a really strong one or two really good mentors, someone who you envy, who you believe is a good leader to eventually emulate, but also that someone that can will pick up the phone when you need them as well too. Bounce ideas off of them, get career advice from as well. I think that can be incredibly valuable. And the sooner you can identify a really good mentor, I think the better off you'll be. So that would be my initial advice is in those early jobs, seek to work for the best leaders within an organization. I know not everybody can choose like what team they're on or those things, but sometimes you can have some flexibility around that. So seek that out. And then also, maybe outside of your company or inside of your company, depending on how it works or the situation you're in, but maybe outside of your company, preferably is try and find somebody that you really that inspires you and that you really believe in, and leverage them as a mentor going forward. I think can be incredibly helpful.
I think, as always, you say powerful things, and not the least of which, so many people say today that the young people are coming out of college, they want to be CEO overnight, and they don't know how to follow people. Well, that's a story that's as old as time.
Right.
And this notion that you share is it's always a good idea to first become a really good follower, know how to do that.
Right.
And I think people lose that way around that. So I think that's really powerful. Thanks for that, Ken. And Vera, how about you? What advice would you give an up and comer, either a recent college graduate or someone who aspires to be a VP in the near future?
I would say, the general advice would be, don't be too much in a rush to be a leader. Because essentially, and again, like it's it's experience that is talking, because I think that my first role with a lot of responsibility in a foreign country with teams and complex projects, and really being responsible for like even a small, but for the entire company with all its like strengths and weaknesses and huge problems in investor relationship. I was like 25, 26 years old. And I said to myself, I'll do my best. I'll work very hard. And technically, you can always do this job. You can do it well. But the amount of internal stress that you will have when being a young leader with tasks that maybe you are capable of doing technically, but maybe not capable of doing emotionally, this time of your life, you will not recuperate. So really think twice and take your time, because the work life is is long enough to try yourself in different roles, to try yourself as a leader, as a coach, as a mentor, and just enjoy the process. And to try to do the best at each stage. And if you really do your best in a way that is authentic, not just to get the things done, but really implicate yourself in a task, you'll be noticed, and you will not even notice how fast you'll be promoted to a leader.
Right. I love that. Everything that you said, both of you, and keep asking yourself, from my perspective, keep asking yourself at every level of your life, why should people work for me? Because it is a gift, and it is a privilege, and it is a massive responsibility, because you have the ability to impact people's lives in such powerful ways. So I think it's a really important question at every level to say, why should people want to work for me? What can I do for them? And be real about it. And you'll find a lot of answers there. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us. And again, N2 Growth live stream, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday. And have a great day, guys. Thank you, Ken, and thank you, Vera, for today. Enjoy.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Ken.